Welcome to the next episode of the Iowa Girls Wrestling Stories podcast. Today I have Denison native, actually Denison graduate, Kyron native, where I went to school, Joey Boyens of Ekin Nutrition. He's, kind of one of the men behind the nutritional strategies like Grandview University. And, he talks with Felicity Taylor, was in touch with the Fargo people all week long. Really cool to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Troy. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk about all the different issues today.
Awesome. And before we get going, I want to make sure I get this done. Ekin Nutrition in Des Moines, Iowa, or is it Waukee? I'm not sure exactly where you're located, but I want you to give us some information on how to get a hold of you. So if there's some good information and they want to get a hold of you and start using Ekin Nutrition, people have that opportunity.
Sure. So we are located in Clive, Iowa. We've been here since 2008. I started as Max Muscle Sports Nutrition, and then about 7 years ago, we became our own brand and created Ekin Nutrition. And we're, like I said, we're in Clive. We're just north the Valley West Mall, so on 100th Street. And our phone number is 515-829-9829. And so we work with all athletes, but we really focus on wrestling. Like you said, I've been working with Grandview now for about the last 8 years, doing all their weight management for them. We just signed up Wartburg. We're going to be working with them this year for the first time, men and women's team. So I'm excited about that. And then we work with a lot of the local high schools as well. So we offer team programs. So Carlisle last year, Northwest, City High, a lot of the high schools around here, most of the Johnston kids we worked with. But we do a lot of the customized meal plans, but it's a lot about education. And so when your kids come down to meet with us, there's a process we go through. We do a free assessment, figure out hydration levels and all that good stuff. And then help decide what is the healthy weight class for these boys and girls to be at. Not necessarily where they need to be placed on the team or where the coach wants them to go, but what is the healthy spot for them to be at? And then we work with the coaches from that point and the parents from that point to do things the right way. And so we do that free assessment when they come in. There's no charge for that. And then we go through a process of what we actually do, which is create macro plans. We sit down with the kids and figure out what time they're practicing, what time they're getting up in the morning, going to bed, and set the times for them. And then they have an app on their phone that we use, and they track their foods for me. That comes right to my dashboard. So every day at the end of the day, I can go through and see what food choices they made. And then as we go, I can give you more details about this, but it's just a lot of data and a lot of education that we're teaching these kids to do things a healthy way instead of the old school way like me and you used to do it. So.
Yeah, we had actually talked about that earlier, the idea of sucking water out of your body, not eating for 2 days, and then going and competing. It just doesn't work. It's amazing that it went on as long as it did, and it's crazy.
It is. And I mean, you look at all the advancements in every sport, right? Whether it's football, baseball, whatever, the training, the practice regimens they have, the equipment they use, the technology, and wrestling really has been kind of stuck back in the Stone Ages. It's just kind of been the old school mentality. And there's been so many advances in technology that we have now. We can see hydration, where their water is going, what their body fat percentage is within 1% accuracy now, instead of doing the old pinch test like we used to do. There's just so many more advancements, and then learning about metabolism and how, taking the little bit of water of your body, how that slows your metabolism down by 20%, and you can't lose that last 1 or 2 pounds. So I think wrestling is finally catching up and finally acknowledging that we have so much more technology that we can use now. And I never like to guess. I don't like to guess how much weight we're going to lose or how much we can lose. I like to know. And so we collect a lot of data. All of my athletes have weight charts for me that they use. So I know what they're waking up at in the morning. I know what they're going to bed at night. I know how much they lose out of practice. I know how much they lose on a cut day versus a training day. And so we just take all the guesswork out of everything. We do this in a really professional and educated way.
That's just amazing to think about that. I've been to Grandview many times. Coach Vaez, Coach Krenzy, Coach Mitchell, all of them. Just the technology they have, the scale they have in the room.
Yeah.
Tell people about that scale, because I'm sure that's something you guys use and maybe even brought in for them.
It's crazy. that scale I actually donated to Grandview. That was the first school I started working with. And so a little bit about Mitchell, when he asked me to come work with him, I was working with, I don't know if you remember Dallas Houchins. He was on the Grandview team, and he was a national caliber wrestler. And an individual actually hired me to do the weight management for Dallas. And he had a great year. I think he finished second or third at nationals that year. And so I had never met Coach Mitchell, and he called me up and left me a voicemail and said, "Hey, I know you worked with Dallas. I want you to work with my whole team." And so I actually didn't even call him back. I was like, he's won 4 national championships in a row. He knows what he's doing. I don't need that kind of pressure. And so he called me a few more times, and I was like, "How about we meet in person? And if you like what I have to say, then we'll try working together." And so I went down and met with him, and kind of showed him the information I was collecting. And at that time, I was doing pinch tests still. But he's got his rings in the back there. And so I just simply asked him, I said, "Hey, you obviously have a good thing going here. Why do you want to change what you're doing?" And his simple answer to me was, "If I'm not moving forward, everybody's catching up to me." And he's like, "Just because we're doing good now, I want to stay ahead of the curve." And that was the perfect answer that he gave me. And so I was like, "Yep, I want to be part of that. I'll help you guys." And so as we advanced, I think it was 2 years later, me and him came up with some different criteria that we wanted our kids to be at, whether, within a certain body fat percentage or a certain weight or whatever. We set up some criteria, and then we brought in the InBody 570 scale, which is what you're referring to. And that gives us so much. It's what they use at the Olympic Training Center. They used to use it there. I think they have new machines now. But that's how we found out about it. And the reason we use that, normally I don't like electrical impedance scales because they're so inaccurate. But the InBody 570 is within 1% accuracy, and it gives me all these water numbers. So before, it was just trying to figure out carbs, proteins, and fats, and you kind of guess what you needed to adjust. Now I can see where those waters are going, and I know automatically if we're giving them enough carbs or not enough carbs to fuel their gas tank. And so that machine is crazy. We utilize that. That is at every one of the schools that we work with. It's at both of my stores in Des Moines. We also have a location in Coralville now, and so we're open over there. We do a lot with big games, so we decided to open a store in Iowa City. But those scales are what we rely on heavily.
Wow, that's just amazing. Before we get too far into the nutrition, I want to back up to where you came from and all those things, and where we both came from. But I read this quote the other day, and I just thought I'd see how you respond to it. I thought it was really good. It's obviously about nutrition, but in a sport where grit meets grind, wrestling demands more than heart. It demands precision, preparation, and purpose. Behind every dominant performance is a nutrition plan that fuels the mindset and the muscles. Does that sound like what you guys do?
Yeah, I'd say that wraps it up and puts a bow on it pretty well. Yeah, I think I don't know, it definitely plays a part. I'm like you. I never like to try and take credit for what these kids are accomplishing, but I like to think that I'm a small part of that. And I always tell the kids the same thing. There's really 3 things in wrestling. There's going to be your gas tank, your strength, and then obviously how gifted of an athlete that you actually are, your technique, and how good of a wrestler you are. We can help with 2 of those things. So we can help with the strength, we can help with the muscle mass, we can help with the body fat percentage, we can help with hydration. And I definitely think that if you look at what is going on with athletics now, and again, this kind of goes back to that advancement in technology and education that we have, and knowing how to fuel the body, you can get so much more. For instance, simple things like eating every 3 to 4 hours. Everybody hears about that, eat small meals, 3 to 4 hours. For an athlete perspective, I mean, that's great for staying healthy and metabolism, losing weight. But from a performance perspective, if your body is getting food every 3 to 4 hours, you never hold on or reserve any of your energy, because in 3 or 4 hours, your body's going to get more fuel. And whereas if we cut old school way, where we wouldn't eat for 2 days, you have nothing left in your gas tank. Yeah, you're going to make weight, but you cannot replenish all that food and all that stuff into your system right before you go onto the mat. And so when you eat every 3 to 4 hours, you're going to excrete basically all of that energy onto the mat. instead of reserving it. And so mentally, you always think I'm giving 100%, right? But if you don't have the nutrition part of it dialed in, your body's not going to let go of 100% of that energy. So that's just one small little thing that we teach the kids.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I wish I'd have known maybe some of that stuff in my days
Well,
of
me
cutting
too.
weight. And actually, it's crazy when like I said, I cut a lot of weight in high school. I went from, 45, 50 down to 25 because that's where Coach Hagan said I should wrestle. 125 is your spot. Okay. I've never lost a match at 130. I beat people that placed at state at 130. Didn't go to state at 125, so I look back at that. And then in college, I wrestled at 142. Obviously, my body just couldn't, it blew up. When I went, the first day I went to Dana College, which is small school, NAI, just like Grandview, but not quite that level. Um, Coach Beeman didn't recognize who I was because my face had blown up so much. My body, I like for probably 3, 4 months, I was just bloated because I don't think my body let anything go because it was so
No.
used to being starved for like 3 months straight. It was crazy. But we'll get onto that. But let's talk about Denison. Just a little bit about Denison. I
Yep.
notice all the time the coaching tree coming out of that is just amazing. So what was your experience like? We had a lot of the same teachers, a lot of the same coaches. We talk about Coach Hagan, had just a fantastic coach. I told you a little story about Mary Getch before we got started. Um, why do you think Denison coaches? Because Denison's not that team that wins everything, right? But I think they have a phenomenal coaching staffs, at least at our time. I really don't know where they're at right now. I don't get back very often, but what do you think those coaches instilled into us?
Um, I think that we were very lucky. Coach Hagan, I still think about him to this day, and his philosophy, his coaching techniques. Um, I think our coaches were really good at knowing how to coach different individuals based on their personalities. I think they could relate to the kids that got in a little bit of trouble. I think they could relate to the kids that did really good in school and needed to be motivated in a different way. Coach Hagan was just a great athlete all around. But I think, and I've noticed this with different coaches too, and I feel like this is what we had in Denison. I don't know who your assistant coach was, but mine was Coach Slaughter.
Yep, I had him.
And okay, and so those were the guys that I don't know if they were the best at teaching technique, but when you got done with your wrestling match, you looked over at the corner to see if your coaches were happy with how you performed, and you would run through a brick wall for them. And that's, I think, what gave us the gut, the blood, sweat, and tears that we had in that room. That that wrestling room was like a dungeon. I remember, every day they'd have to send us up to go get an ice bag to set on the
Yeah.
thermostat so the heat would keep running in there. And but again, I think it was just their coaching technique and how well they related to the kids. And again, we had them in classes, so you knew them outside of the coaching room. A lot of times now in today's day and age, coaches don't really teach the kids in high schools. They don't build that relationship with them outside of the wrestling room. Whereas we saw the coaches, in the classroom, in the wrestling room. And so they knew if you were doing well in your classes, they knew if you were doing well in the wrestling room, whatever it might be. But I just think that we were really blessed to have the coaching staff that we did while we were in Denison. I know when I was there, our team, I believe went undefeated my sophomore year. We had Barons and
Yep.
White Neck and Teesons and Josh Rogers, Derek Marshall. I mean, Hal Cobb. The list was endless. I think we sent 8 kids to state that year, but I do remember coming down to Dowling and wrestling them. And coming to Des Moines from Denison, Iowa, you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to get killed. And we
Uh-huh.
destroyed Dowling that year. And so anyway, I just have some great memories of Denison. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I know we weren't the biggest, but I felt like we were the best in that day and age. And I feel like we had the best coaches too.
Yeah, I remember Slaughter. So, it was, I remember little things about him because with the big weight cut and stuff in practice, sometimes he was that one that kept me going. Because he'd joke around with me here and there, and I'd have maybe like a Jamie Bankford. I don't know if you know Bankford or not,
Yeah.
and just a goofy kid, but Hagan be blowing whistles. I'd already started like 15 seconds into and Slaughter's just laughing at things we're doing to poor Jamie and things like that. Oh my God, stories. Since we're going to talk about hydration, I brought up Jamie Bankford. I've only seen this happen one time in life. He was doing a big cut. He was trying to cut Sean Rogers, Josh's older brother, and that was at 130.
Yep.
I was at 125, so he was going to go to 120, which that was probably the dumbest thing he ever thought of. But so it was. He probably hadn't eaten for 3 days, hadn't drank anything, and in plastics. And I know we weren't supposed to wear plastics, but I don't know how they got on our bodies, but they did. Um, he full body cramped. I've actually never. I mean, he was like I've never seen. I don't know how close to actual death he might have actually
Paralyzed.
been, but he was, and he ended up wrestling 30. He was almost to 20. He wrestled 35 the next day because he had gained probably 15 pounds that day, and mostly probably water weight. Craziest thing I've ever seen
Yeah.
in the wrestling room. And you're right, that room
Well, I
wasn't
got
vented. We'll we'll uh we'll go back. Let's just start with old school weight cut versus
yep.
how we're figuring out where we should be at weight and how we get there. Old school weight cut,
Sure.
like we've already talked. Take away water, probably at least 2, maybe 3 days ahead of time. You're just sipping nothing the night before. And I remember weighing out. I got a water bottle here, weighing out six, I maybe be right on or a little bit over. I knew I floated a pound, pound and a half. I would measure out 16 ounces of water, and that's what I would have that day. That was that probably all I had that entire day. My mom was pretty good. She would force me to eat any day but the night before a meet. And it usually was a chicken breast and maybe some green beans. And then she sent she sent real thin bread with honey on it to school. That's all I would have in one milk. The entire wrestling
Yep.
season was
Yep.
horrible. So what are we doing now to get down to weight?
So, yeah, things have changed so much, and the problem with that old school way of cutting weight is that you slowly kill your metabolism. And when you kill your metabolism, just like you were talking about when you went to college after that, your body holds on to everything because it's like, oh my God, I'm finally getting food. I need to store this. I need to hold on to it because who knows when they're going to take it away again. And so that's the biggest thing. The other difference was that when you and I were wrestling, we would weigh in at 7 o'clock the morning of a duel, and you had all day to rehydrate and
Yep.
again, that's not even the healthy way to do it. But your body would hold on to that. And so what I explain to my athletes is that if your body is used, your carbs are your gas tank, right? And so if your body is only used to getting 50 carbs a day when you're cutting, and then you try and go and reload and you flood it with like 300 carbs. What was it? Miss Olson would take us up to the home ec room and make us a huge breakfast after
Yeah.
weigh-ins, and that it felt great to eat it, but what it was doing to our athletic performance was really killing us later that day. But long story short, if your body's only used to getting 50 carbs a day and then you flood it with 300, you're either going to store that as fat. It's going to make you feel really sluggish, almost like you ate a Thanksgiving dinner, or you're going to be in the bathroom, getting rid of everything because your body doesn't know even how to process it anymore. And so over time, that kills you as the season goes on. And our theme is always, we want to be peaking at the end of the season, not depleted. And when you cut weight the wrong way or do your weight management the wrong way, by the end of the season, you're starting to wear down and lose to people that you were beating pretty easily at the beginning of the season, just because your gas tank, you cannot recover, and you've used up basically all your energy for the season already. So weight cutting now is completely different. We start when we talk about weight management. We try and keep our college athletes within 5% of their wrestling weight. We try and keep our high school kids within 2 to 3% of their wrestling weight. And when I talk about that walking around weight, that's what they're waking up at. So a lot of kids get really nervous if they weigh themselves during the day because they're consuming water, they're eating, so their weight goes up 4 or 5 pounds, which it should. What they're not taking into consideration is that when they go to practice, they're going to lose that 3 or 4 pounds through sweat and because their metabolism is flying, and they'll float more overnight. When you go old school way, all of a sudden when you start cutting, now we're only losing 1 or 2 pounds out of practice, which my guys are losing, 8, 9 pounds out of practice, which gives them a huge advantage. When they don't have to take their food away, they can lose that out of practice. But that's all because we got their metabolism flying and they stay hydrated. So like the number one rule, if you come work with Ekin Nutrition, is a gallon of water a day, period. That we make our athletes drink a gallon of water. It takes 3 molecules of water to hold 1 molecule of glycogen or 1 carb molecule, which is your gas tank. So the second you start taking water away, you lose the ability to store those glycogen stores, and that's your gas tank. no matter what in wrestling, you're eventually going to run into someone that has better technique than you or that might be stronger than you. And so you always got to find a way to win that match. That might be having the bigger gas tank and take them into the deep rounds. You go out there with a guy that has a ton of muscle mass on them or a girl that has a ton of muscle mass, that takes oxygen. And so they have to carry that all the way through the match. So if you can make it into that third period with them and still have your gas tank, you have a really good shot at beating some high talented kids that you might not normally beat if you didn't have your nutrition dialed in. And so that's the big thing with cutting weight. I won't let my kids cut more than 2 days. So if they have a duel on Thursday, our weight cut starts on Thursday. And again, I have all that data to go by. So I'm tracking their weights. I'm seeing how much it is in a practice. If they're not eating their food and they're not drinking, what you'll see at a practice and overnight is not near as much of a loss at practice, not near as much of a loss floating overnight. And that's because they took their water, their food away. And if they wouldn't have done that, we want the food to work for us. We want the nutrition to do the work for us. I don't want my kids getting up and having to get on the treadmill for 2 hours in the morning before they're going to go compete. I want them to wake up about a pound under so we can still drink and eat some food going up, leading up to the match. And that's the difference between old school and new school now.
Yeah. So if we go into the carbs versus protein versus, all that, what would you recommend? I know it's different for almost everybody, and that's why you use what you do, the scales and you tracking, and so you can dial that stuff in. But I'm out in Western Iowa. Let's say I got some parents that we just can't afford to do that. I just need I need some basics. What do I need for carbs during the season every day? What do I need for protein? Fat?
So the carbs is kind of a moving scale. And so the goal with carbs is always to get that ceiling as high as you can possibly get it until you start putting bad weight on. When you start putting bad weight on, you know that your carbs, that's your ceiling. That's as high as you can go. So the goal for us is, we start at about 150 carbs and we start working our way up and get as high as we possibly can until that weight starts sticking to them. Then we know that's our ceiling. Then when we go to do our weight cuts, so let's just use round numbers and say that you're at 100 carbs a day and that's your limit. Well, then when we go to our weight cuts, we're going to go down to about 50 carbs for those 2 days. We cut them in half, basically. It's a really good rule of thumb. So again, if you're up to 300, your cut days are going to be about 150 carbs a day, which is still quite a bit of food. And so that's how the carbs work. As far as the protein goes, the protein is important to get in every 3 to 4 hours. And that's going to depend on how much muscle mass and you have versus what weight you're going to be wrestling at. So the biggest struggle that kids have is going to the wrong weight because their body fat percentage is too low. When your body fat percentage and you're walking around at 5% body fat, all you have to lose to get to weight is muscle. You have no fat left on your body. And so when you got to start robbing from that, the only way to get rid of muscle is to starve it. And that's the problem. So the biggest thing is we want to have the right amount of muscle mass on each one of these athletes. So we don't have to cut into that. You want to keep their body fat high enough to where they can lose that to make weight instead of the muscle that they have to use to store the glycogen. So that's how we figure that out. A good rule of thumb, basically for the girls, if you can stick at 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if they're wrestling at 100 pounds, they should be getting at least 100 grams of protein in a day. Split that up between 6 meals, do the math, and you can figure out how to do that. A lot of times we have our meals a little bit bigger than our snacks. And so again, we're spacing this out every 3 to 4 hours. So you might have 4 ounces of meat at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or eggs or whatever you might be having. Yep. And then you might cut that in half for your snacks in between breakfast and lunch, and between lunch and dinner, and then before you go to bed at night. And that's one of the big things is a lot of kids don't want to eat after, kind of like you said, you didn't eat the night before a wrestling match, whatever. The problem with that is it slows your metabolism down when you're trying to float overnight. So we always want our kids, we'll take the carbs away sometimes, but we still want them to get at least 14 grams of protein in at nighttime before they go to bed. Cottage cheese is really the best thing to have right there, or a casein protein. And the reason why is that is a time release protein. It breaks down really slowly. So it's almost like taking a fat burner before you go to bed at night. It keeps your metabolism going all night long while you're sleeping. And so that's the big thing. The other thing is that we really monitor sugars. So, and this is probably the biggest, even more so than the protein or the carbs, is keeping their sugars at 20% or less of their total carb intake. Okay. So if they're getting 100 carbs a day, you only want 20 grams of that coming from sugar. Okay. If you do that and you keep that really strict and you're eating really clean, the night before a wrestling match, you could actually have a little dish of ice cream or a chocolate chip cookie or something, and it's going to spike the insulin levels, and they're going to lose an extra pound overnight while they're sleeping. So you can play little tricks like that with their nutrition if you got it dialed in their log and their foods, and you have that kind of data.
I was actually just going to ask because I had someone tell me a few years back, probably 5 or 6 years back, that same exact thing. The insulin spike right before bed will help cut that weight. Now, I wasn't sure if
Yep.
that was real or fact or fantasy. It's good to know that it is, but you also, in order to do that, kind of have to have things dialed in correctly. You can't just, oh, I'm gonna have a bowl of
Yeah,
ice
you
cream
can't be
tonight
yeah,
because I
you
love
can't
ice
be eating
cream.
sugar every night. Right.
Because
Well,
I'll tell you,
one of
it
my
doesn't
best
work for me.
we're in a different category now, Troy. We're not competing like we used to. But Kyvan Kyvan Gadsden is a perfect example of that. He did really good. The problem with Kyvan is that he has his own ice cream named after him, and so when I tell him to have a little bit, he'd have a whole quart, and I'm like, man, we can't keep doing that for him. So
Yeah, I love ice cream. There's that's one of the things. I grew up in a Swans man came to the house, and I don't know if you remember the old dial locks. You dial the number to get in, right? He knew our
yep.
dial lock number. He knew how to get to the basement, and we had a build to list. I'm not even kidding you. We actually, my dad, brother, everybody loved ice cream. We had a build to, so he'd just leave the order, and there'd be a blank check on the table for him. It was nuts. So
That's a
I
good
grew up in,
customer.
yeah, we used to, and then like Dairy Queen, best Dairy Queen in the state in Denison. Anyway, I remember having races with we started with pints, but I would graduate to where I could eat a quart. So ice cream is there's always. Well, you mentioned Eric Cobb. Eric's we I used to work a little bit with Eric, and we would go out to a lot of all you can eat buffets, and Eric has not gotten any smaller. And there was always room for ice cream because it melts around everything, right? So,
Right,
so when you say I can lose weight eating ice cream, I'm all about this. But
right,
no,
right.
so yeah, that's and here's the Hagen. Do you remember? Did you guys ever do this in your morning runs? Ice cream and cereal. He would bring in a gallon
Oh
of
yeah,
ice cream, and I
and you put
it
some
has to be
fruity
healthy.
pebbles or cocoa.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
you would do ice cream with cocoa pebbles or fruity pebbles or cinnamon toast crunch, and then we would. The other thing, do you remember we would always do Mountain Dew and orange juice? We would
yeah,
always get orange juice and pour Mountain Dew in with it and get some energy going.
yeah. So are those staples of the Ekin Nutrition?
No,
No longer staples, huh?
no, those are long gone, long gone.
Yes, yeah. I remember having Mountain Dew and Snickers and stuff like that for breakfast after a weigh-in, and yeah, I'm really happy that the sports evolved to where it's at. Are getting there. There's still a lot of people that will cut old school and cut kids. I drives me nuts to hear. I do a lot with AAU and the AAU state, and kids are, oh, I had to lose this weight this week. I'm like, no, you should go up a weight. There's no reason for a
Yeah,
for a youth kid to be cutting any weight at all. Well, why don't we talk
our
about youth kids
biggest,
cutting some weight? Why don't you? I mean, because I'm
yeah,
sure you deal with that.
yeah. It's probably our biggest problem that we have is trying to talk kids into going up a weight class. And again, we do this all based on data. So I would never put a kid, go up just to go up. If their muscle mass is where it needs to be at and everything, our mentality has kind of changed from how low can we get and compete to how big can I get and who can hang with me. And that's really the mentality that a wrestler should have, is like, how much muscle can I actually put on? I'm a good wrestler. Who can hang with me at this size? And you're seeing this not just in amateur wrestling, but you see in professional sports all the time, UFC, boxing. Everybody is starting to move up a weight class, because why do you take two athletes, cut them down and make them miserable, and then have a half-assed performance in the ring or on the mat, when you could have them both at full strength, at their best weight, at their best physical performance level, and have a great match? And I think once people started figuring that out, uh, that has kind of changed the whole thing. But as far as youth cutting weight, there's so many problems, especially with girls. And whether it's the relationship with food, whether it's their self-esteem and how they view themselves with appearance wise, there's a lot of things. It's the parents that our age that cut school or cut the old school way and don't know any better. And so if it worked for them, they think it should work for their kids. And they just haven't really evolved with the education part of it. And there's no one really teaching it. And so it's really hard to learn. If you see something on social media, you get 10 different stories and 10 different ways to do things. And it gets really confusing. And before you know it, you're lost and you're just going old school, starving and not drinking water. But these poor girls, I mean, when you start taking nutrients away during their growing years, and the boys as well, wrestlers aren't genetically short and stocky people. It's because they took their nutrients away while they were in growth periods of their maturity, and now they never grew. And so females, you start having issues with menstrual cycles, with delayed maturity, all sorts of different things. And so it's really important to get control of this right away. And I think a lot of times there's coaches, clubs that pressure kids to go to a certain weight class because they see the potential there. And again, I'm not knocking them for that. That's how they run their show. But I really push my kids to go to clubs and to coaches that aren't going to force them to cut weight as a youth. And again, there's times when you can. If you go to these bigger tournaments, if you're going to Fargo, if you're going to Super 32s, if you're going to that stuff, you have to cut weight or you're just going to be undersized. There's just no way around it. But that's not something that you should base tournament wrestling versus high school wrestling is completely different. I'm okay cutting a little more weight for a weekend tournament than I am, during a whole high school season, because there's so many more times you got to make weight. It wears these kids down, and it's not the right way to do it. So our biggest battle is usually getting kids to convince them to go up to the right weight class where they really should be at. I think they're nervous to upset their coaches. I think they're nervous to upset their parents. And I think some of them are just nervous to go up. They think they're not going to be strong enough. And when you start showing them this data and they can see the progress they're making, and you get them on these scales and they can see their scans, it starts to give them confidence. And then we meet with them every 2 weeks. And you mentioned something earlier in the show about, man, I lost my train of thought. Dang it. I had something really good there too.
It'll come back. It always does.
Yeah, it'll come back. But anyway, yeah, that's the hardest thing to do. And you don't want to upset customers. You don't want to upset parents, but we just tell the truth. We're like, hey, this is where we see they should be at. I'd move them up. Sometimes it's 2 weight classes. And it's mostly dependent on what their body fat percentage is at, honestly.
Yeah. I look at, if Grandview's doing it and the success that Nick Mitchell's had, it might be something to look at. If we're looking at following success, and that's what we should probably be doing, copy it. You can't get much better than Nick Mitchell. Nick Mitchell's story. So I had never met him before, and I'd been in a couple practices where it was a former Grandview person. I was like, man, they talk about Nick Mitchell like he's some god, and I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. So I took my first female wrestler down to. She was the first person to sign, and Crinzy and Vias had not been hired yet. So Mitchell did the thing, all of our walk around and our talks and stuff. And I got out of that talk and I said, man, if you don't go wrestle for this guy, you're an idiot. I'm ready to see if I got a year of eligibility left, and I was like almost 50 at the time, I'm like, this guy is amazing. And yeah, after being around the Grandview programs, both men's and women's, man, there's some good stuff going on there. So if they're doing it, I think it's something that we as high school coaches, as youth coaches, really need to start looking into this and making sure that we're staying caught up. Like you said, Mitchell said, if I'm not doing this, people are going to catch up to me. I'm out here in Western Iowa, and I started, my team was one of the, had a lot of numbers when we first started, because I started with a large group of girls that have been wrestling a long time, but now people are catching up, and it's something maybe I should be looking at more, is where our nutrition gets dialed in.
Well, and I remember what I was trying to say earlier that you brought up, is that when these kids are so focused on making weight, they're not focused on getting better. And that makes it really hard as a coach. As a coach, you're there to get these kids better on the mat, teach them technique, and make them better wrestlers. You shouldn't be worried about their weight. And so that's where we come in, and we try and take that pressure off the coach and off the kids. So, hey, let us handle the weight. Let us worry about that. You worry about getting better on the mat. And I think when the coaches are like, when we approach coaches sometimes, and really we don't approach anybody anymore, they've been coming to us now. But back in the day when we would, and you were trying to sell this, you're like, hey, this is not going to be extra work for you. This isn't something you got to pay attention to. This is us taking this off your plate so you can do what you do and coach, and not have to be a dietitian or a nutritionist for your wrestlers. And so we've built really good partnerships with the coaches we work with. Nick Mitchell, I can't say enough good things about him, and he really cares about his athletes. And you can tell when they bring Dylan Siebel, we do a lot with those guys up there now too, and they're really starting to embrace the nutrition and the health aspect of this and the health of their athletes. And so I'm always pushing my people to go there to the coaches that really care about you. Back to Hagen and Slaughter, right? Like I said, we'd run through a brick wall for them because we know they would do that for us. And this is just them bringing another I guess, way to take them to the next level, to make them better athletes and to do it in a healthy way. And so I have the utmost respect for Coach Mitchell and Carew and all these guys that we work with, because they're really starting to get it.
Yeah. Well, and just the teams that you've mentioned that you're working with, Grandview, Wartburg, in the state of Iowa, there's not much better in the, even our D1 programs are great, but that's the best program in NAIA. That's the best program in D3. We should be looking at what they're doing.
We took over UNI 2 years ago. And I think you've seen what's happened with them over the last 2 years too. And again, not saying that's all because of us, but I think we've made a big impact up there with those guys and taking it off Schwab's plate as far as worrying so much about the weight. And, Parker Keckheisen, he's one of my favorite wrestlers ever. And when I went up there 2 years ago to work with them, Parker wasn't really buying into the whole nutrition thing. He had just gotten second place at nationals the year before. And so I was worried about ruffling his feathers, but I said, hey, what do you got to lose? You got second last year. Try and do it my way, and let's see what happens. And he ended up winning the national championship. And again, not saying that's all because of nutrition, but I think that made an impact on how he performed. And I think he'd be the first one to tell you. In fact, after nationals this year, he called me or sent me a text and said, hey, I want to get back on the plan and keep rolling with this. And he's got a lot more to do in his wrestling career. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, Coach Schwab got Coach of the Year. Every one of the guys made it to nationals this year. So we had a great year with UNI, and we just keep building on that. And again, Coach Schwab, there's another one of those Iowa boys that really care about their athletes. And you look at the facilities that UNI has and the budget they have compared to, say, Iowa or Iowa State. What Schwab is doing up there and how he's developing these wrestlers is really cool to be a part of and to watch. And so I'm very blessed to be part of that program as well.
Yeah, Schwab. Well, I don't know if they still came down, but Mark and Mike Schwab used to come down to Denison quite a bit when I was in high school, because Hagen was still pretty involved with UNI, and I even got to work junior national when Fargo was at Northern Iowa, when it was junior nationals at Fargo in Northern Iowa. I actually worked that as security a couple times, so that was always kind of fun to go there with Hagen. Yeah. Got to see him in a different light when you were out of school. But yeah, no, that was fun. But yeah, Northern Iowa, man, that program has really picked up. Schwab's a great coach. I'm just amazing what he's done up there. But that's really cool that you've been part of that thing. Like you said, the facilities, they're practicing at USA Wrestling Club. It's not even their facilities right now, and stuff. So
yeah, I walked in there. I walked in there and I was like, how are you recruiting at all? So what a testament to the culture they're building there to get these guys to come in. I mean, the fun thing for me now too is that I started working with high schools about 5 years ago. So a lot of my kids, we ended up having 100 kids this year make the state tournament. Wow. I think we had 12 state champs this year. It was really cool because this was the 100th year of state wrestling, and we had 100 kids qualify. So that was really neat. But now these kids that have been working in high school are coming up to the next level. So I got the Frost boys at Iowa State and the Helgesons, and Nacknaborns and those guys. And now I got Knack and Freeman and those guys up at UNI. And so they already know how to do this. This is like riding a bike for them. So it makes my job a lot easier. And I think they're all excited to have me at the college level now because we had such good success with them in high school. The nice thing also is that since they know so much, I don't have to do near as much teaching and coaching as I had to. Those guys make my job pretty easy now.
You've laid the foundation. Now you can kind of reap some of those awards. I've found that too. Now as a coach, I've developed the Hagen knees and stuff, so I can't hardly take a shot to save my life. But I've coached enough now. The people coming up have been with me long enough. I don't have to do those things anymore. They can show those.
Right.
They can show the moves, and I can maybe tweak it a little bit and help them. But I don't. I haven't wrestled more than maybe 6 minutes in the last 2 years. Like wrestled,
Yeah.
actual live,
Right.
which is great. My figure's showing
Hey,
also too.
self-preservation.
Another big thing that you guys do, supplements, and that's something that we had talked prior to. You know, I lifted with some guys from your area. I got big and strong, creatine and protein powder. That's all we knew. But supplements is a big
Yep.
thing and people don't get a lot of, we're busy. We don't eat the best sometimes. What are some things that supplements can do for us? What are some things maybe you recommend during a season?
That is a great question. We have the Ekin is a supplement store, and so we're very well versed in supplements and the ingredients. Everything that we have in the store is NCAA compliant. I'm very fussy about what I give the kids because once it's in your body, you're not getting it back out. And so I'm very particular. I've been doing this for 17 years, and so I've narrowed down to about 5 brands that I really trust and believe in. And that will send me, they meet label claims. They'll send me proof of insurance. They'll send me their batch reports so I can make sure that all the ingredients are legit. But there's really 4 things that we recommend to the wrestlers. First one is going to be beta alanine. And what that does is it stops your lactic acid from building up. So basically delays fatigue. So I don't know if you remember this, but probably 15, 20 years ago, the NCAA tried to ban beta alanine for wrestling because they called it a performance enhancing drug because it was so beneficial. And so they banned it. 2 years later, the Olympic teams made it mandatory that you had to be on beta alanine when you came into Colorado Springs because it was so effective. So beta alanine is number one. That's one of the ones. The other one is going to be called super carb, and that's from a company called NutriBio. And what that is a carb replacement and electrolytes. And so think of Gatorade times 1,000 and without the sugar and the dyes. That's what this product does. So it doesn't have to go through your stomach lining. It immediately absorbs into your bloodstream. So it reloads your glycogen in between matches. So like all the high school teams I work with down here now, they all use that on the sidelines at halftime of football games. My wrestlers, it's really important, instead of Pedialyte or Gatorade after a weigh-in, you're going to drink a super carb, and then you're going to sip on that in between your matches to reload your electrolytes and your glycogen levels into your body without any stomach discomfort. The nice thing about that one is it uses a carb called cluster dextrin. So there's no insulin response. So you don't have any spike from energy and any crash from energy. And you also don't have any weight gain. So when you're trying to manage weight, since there's no insulin response, there's no weight gain from it. So it's a really good carb to use for that. So the beta alanine, super carb. The next one is going to be a good protein shake. And I'm not talking about a protein shake that you get at your local grocery store or a big box store. Protein, there's 82 different grades of protein. And so you really have to pay attention to your protein source. A lot of them have a ton of fillers that is going to cause inflammation. It's going to keep your weight up. You can't get rid of that extra slate of water that it creates in your body. And so a really clean protein, like a Fusion 30, it has 30 grams of protein per scoop. You only need about 4 ounces of water to mix it. So it's a very small shake. And then lastly is going to be glutamine. And glutamine is for recovery. So wrestling practices, duels, all that stuff, constantly cutting weight, you build up a lot of inflammation in your body. This is going to take away your soreness. It's going to increase growth hormone levels. It's good for intestinal tract health. It's what 60% of your skeletal muscle mass is made up of. So out of all the supplements I've said, you can eat enough protein, you can eat enough carbs, you can get that through food sources, but glutamine, you have to supplement.
Wow, that's I might we might have to make a date where I come down to the store and just maybe make some videos, take
I love
some,
it.
buy some supplements, kind of see what everything works. Maybe I'll bring a couple of kids down and we'll go through some stuff and I think that'd be a really cool
I,
thing. I'm kind
I
of
love
blown
it.
away because I've talked to nutritionists in the past, and I'm not they did a great job for me. As far as helping out our team. I have a lady, local lady that comes in once a year and kind of gives us some plans. She's more into bodybuilding and she's a amateur bodybuilder, and I think she's close to getting her pro card. So she's into more
Okay.
of that than the wrestling side of it. Um, but man, just some of the things you told me, it blows my mind. You know, I would never even think that there's something that can enhance our, less fatigue. Wow, what a great idea in wrestling. You know, uh,
Yeah.
getting your electrolytes without having an insulin spike and not having the sugar and the crash,
Yeah.
because that's that it just I'm trying to remember what Spark. That's what all the when I was helping at Dana College. I coached the last 2 years. It was open, and all the kids were taking Spark, and I was like, God, there's got to be something wrong with that. That probably doesn't seem like
Well,
the
there,
best
yeah, I'm
idea.
glad you brought that up. That's another thing that we have to educate on a lot is that all the energy drinks that are out there now, right? And so Spark would be one of those. And what people don't understand is that caffeine is going to increase the rate of your fatigue, right? So caffeine constricts your blood vessels, and when you're trying to fuel your muscle, you want those blood vessels opened up, and when it constricts, it puts more pressure on your heart, so your heart rate increases, which is going to make you tired faster. And so I try and keep the kids away from all those caffeinated energy drinks as much as possible, not to mention some of the sweeteners they use cause a lot of inflammation in the body. And that's the other thing is when kids start eating correctly, they have natural energy. They don't need to supplement with caffeine, but that vicious cycle of starving
Yeah.
yourself and then feeling so depleted that you'd have some caffeine quick. And that is just a downward spiral. So if we can get the kids eating correctly, they don't even need the caffeine. They don't miss it. But if they're relying on caffeine to get through a practice or a tournament or something like that, they're definitely doing something wrong. They need to fix a few things.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do for us is I need to come down there. I need to come get more educated and maybe look into some of this stuff. I think that'd be awesome. Maybe
Well, you're
sometime in the
welcome
next few
down here
weeks.
anytime. We can put them on the InBody, get a scan, show you what those scans show and all that stuff. And then for the people that are watching, all of the products in my store are open. And so we sample everything. I'll give you stuff to take home with and try. The last thing I want is for parents to come in and spend a bunch of money and then go home with something the kids don't like. And so we let the kids
Yeah.
try everything, taste everything, take it home and try it, see how they feel on it. I get in more trouble with parents and kids for talking them out of supplements than I do talking them into, because there's a million things that they want to take or their friend might be taking or something like that. But again, I want them to understand why they're consuming it, what it's going to do for them, how it's going to affect them. And then I like to get most of the nutrients through food and not supplements. Supplements, I think, are overused. I think people rely on them way too much because they don't have their diet figured out. And so you can always add a supplement, but it's after you get the good, solid nutritional foundation down is when you add that stuff.
Yeah, I might even be able to get my bikini body back. I just spent a couple I just spent a couple weeks in Florida and I didn't take my shirt off. So, you know,
Hey, never too old to keep improving, right?
that's right. Um, Awesome information. I know I told you I do a lot of on these podcasts about getting to know people, and I got some questions that kind of fit in with this, but I thought we'd go through some of these. Um, they go back and forth between wrestling and just your own personal yourself. That way, we've been going about an hour. I think this will take us another 15, 20 minutes or so. That's about the perfect amount of time. I'm going to come down for sure. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm not coming down and going through and doing
Great.
some videos and stuff like that. So um, first question I usually ask the kids is, what are you eating after weigh-ins in the morning before tournament? So what's your recommendation? What's something simple, easy they can have along with them and eat before a weigh-in or after
Um,
weigh-in?
After weigh-ins, the first thing I'm going to do is get them a super carb, get them one of those super carbs to reload all their electrolytes and everything that they might have depleted. But a good breakfast burrito with egg whites is usually my favorite thing to eat, not the whole grain. So on days of competition, we switch to simple carbs. We want them to absorb really quickly in our system. We don't want things like oatmeal. We don't want a lot of fiber things. It's going to sit in the stomach. It's going to hold water. It's going to make them feel uncomfortable. So we're going with simple carbs. So a white tortilla, probably about 30 to 45 grams. You don't want more than 21 grams of protein. So that would be 3 eggs or less. Okay. So what I would do there would be like a 2 egg whites, about an ounce of cheese, and some Canadian bacon or something like that, a little bit of sodium with a white tortilla. Anytime you get more than 20 grams of protein in the stomach, the blood flow starts to go there to digest protein. It goes to life processes first. And we want that blood to be going to the muscle that we need to shuttle all the nutrients to. And so no more than 21 grams of protein there is what we're looking for. But a breakfast burrito, turkey sliders are a big hit. There's the right amount of sugar in those Hawaiian rolls that we use. And then you can put about 2 ounces of turkey and an ounce of cheese on there and be perfect for what you need for macros right there.
Very good. Yeah. I actually bring some of that stuff. I don't use the Hawaiian rolls, but I might have to switch over to that. That's a good idea. I love the Hawaiian rolls anyway.
The Hawaiian rolls, it doesn't have as much volume, but there's a lot of carbs in there. And so I'm always going for less volume and the most nutrients.
So when we're talking about food in wrestlers, it's the last weigh-in you'll ever have. What's the guilty pleasure? Where are we going out to eat, and what are we having?
Oh man, myself personally.
So I mean, you obviously eat healthy, you do all this. So if you're going to go have a cheat night, where are you going out to eat, and what are you going to eat?
I'm probably going pizza. That's probably going to be my thing, or a big Italian meal would be my go-to. There's a restaurant down here called Simon's that the food's unbelievable. You got to get there early, otherwise you're going to be waiting for a long time. But I'm going with I'm more of a salty guy. I'm not big into the sweets or the desserts. So but if you put enchiladas or lasagna or something in front of me, it's going down.
Gotcha. Nice. A lot of wrestlers, back in the day, I had my Walkman, the yellow sports Walkman with my headphones that I listened to prior to a match. Did you listen to music before matches?
Yep. Shout at the Devil was probably my go-to, Motley Crue, or Judas Priest, Turbo Lover. One of those two were probably my go-to songs.
we probably still have a similar playlist. Is there anything, now has your music changed? Are you listening to something different now?
Yeah. I mean, the older I get, the less hard rock I'm listening to. I'm more a country now, I would say, than I was back then. I mean, growing up in Denison, I was on the farm sometimes, I was on the field sometimes. So I listened to a little bit of everything. And then, my family business was driving truck. And so I like about every kind of music that there is. But like if I'm working out, I'm going to listen to some probably Korn or Alice in Chains, something like that. But just on a normal day, I'm getting a little bit more laid back and getting into the Eagles and some of the old school stuff like that still.
Nice. Being around the kids all the time, I've actually listened to a lot more modern music. I've never really been a huge rap person, so maybe not that, but I really think there's some good singer-songwriters right now, in country and other things. I think it's actually a good time for music, in my opinion.
I do too, and I think we needed that because there's been a couple of decades now that we've been missing some really good musicians and artistry. And so I like what's happening with music right now. Country is really taking off. I mean, we're going to Jason Aldean in a couple months down here. And I know that's going to be a good one. We're going to Alabama, believe it or not, down in Branson in August. Nice. We're going to go watch them. I've never seen them before. But then like my last concert I went to was, oh my gosh, Shinedown. That was the last concert I went to. So there's a lot of good stuff out there right now.
Yeah. So I know you're busy. Do you have any TV shows that you binge?
I just moved to a new house and got my first Traeger smoker, and so we've been doing a lot of cooking here. I don't know. It's a good question. I'd probably say the Barbecue Brawl is the one I've been watching the most. Just 'cause I'm trying to. Have you seen that?
I watch Barbecue Brawl. I love it's crazy because I do watch a lot of the cooking shows. I don't know why
Yeah.
cooking competition. Man, I suppose it's just competition, and I do love food. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning something there. I feel like it's actually educational for me because I'm not a good cook, and so I'm trying to get better as I go. But yeah, I would say the cooking shows are what I've really been into right now. But otherwise, the Ozarks and all those kind of shows, I get into that once in a while. But I'm usually watching sports or following the wrestling thing.
yeah,
I'm mostly a sports guy.
gotcha. So we're gonna go back to your wrestling days. Um, what was your go-to takedown?
Oh, double for sure.
Nope, just double.
Yeah,
On top,
yeah,
how
just
was your
straight double.
on top? Were you what was your pinning combination? What'd you work for?
Um, you know, I think back then they called it the chicken wing. Would always go would
Yep,
always go with the half chicken wing. Do you remember Scott Anderson?
yep.
Uh, when I was learning to wrestle, he would always head scoop me. And so if I could ever get back into a head scoop, I know there's so many different things now that they do, but back then, if I could get a good solid head scoop on, I really enjoyed that. That one just seemed like it would paralyze me, and I could never get out of it. And so if I could apply that to somebody, I was always pretty happy.
Getting off the bottom. What was your go-to off the whistle?
Set out.
Set out. I would say I'm a set
Yeah.
out person too. That's probably coming from
Yeah.
Hagen. Most of everything
Yeah.
you said, other than I was a fireman's carry guy from Hagen. But
Yeah. From
fireman's
Hagen.
carry, yep,
I was never good at that. I was never good at that. I was always afraid I would get just rolled over. I never could commit to that. And so I would always go with double. That came from football, probably, where I would just want to shoot in and tackle. But yeah, the sit out, I think we drilled that over and
yep.
over and over and over. And so that off the whistle, that was my first move every time.
Yep, I show that same set out series all the time that Hagen showed,
Yeah.
all the his progression through it. And then firemen's, the reason I committed to it, it was the Ida Grove tournament. And I don't know if you guys got kicked out of the Ida Grove tournament for winning it. We won it 2 years in a row, and then I think Dennison won it two more, so 4 years in a row, and they kicked us out for a while. Um,
Yeah.
but my sophomore year, I think it was the fifth place match. I hit a fireman's carry against someone that was probably way better than me and pinned them. And I was like, well, this is the way to go. Instead of getting 2 points for a takedown, I'm putting them on their back and we're getting a pin. And I beat a lot of guys that were probably better wrestlers than me just because I had a fireman's carry. So I forever will be
Yeah.
my
I
favorite
believe
move.
that.
Thank you, Brent Hagen. Um, well, one of my questions I always ask the kids is, after wrestling's all over, are you going to give back? And obviously, you have been giving back in a different way that I didn't even think about. Usually, I talk about coaching or officiating, but giving back in the idea of nutrition and just a whole other concept. That's a so I don't even have to ask that question. Um, here's one I will ask you because I know you wrestled, you played football, um, and it doesn't have to be wrestling, but how about what's a moment in your athletic journey that changed how you see yourself?
Um, Honestly, it wasn't until I was about 30 years old, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I didn't have a lot of confidence in sports growing up. I knew I was good at sports. I knew I was fast, but I never felt like I was the best, or I never had a lot of confidence. I was a smaller kid, in school. We got in some trouble and had some fights and stuff like that. But I was confident there, but on the field and on the mat, I always felt like I was small. I never felt strong, even though we lifted weights and I was one of the bigger kids as far as lifting goes. But really, until I was about 30 years old, when I started training MMA down in Omaha, I realized that, since I wrestled in high school, I fought at 155 starting out. And I was, I'm a little over 6 foot tall. So I was tall enough that no one could get close to me. And I was a good enough wrestler that if they tried to take me down, I could stuff them. And so that's really when I started building confidence, not probably until then, when I realized that, hey, I can hang with these guys. I remember when I had quit trucking and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do professionally. I went down there and started training. Well, my buddy called me and he was like, hey, I want you to come down and train with us in Omaha. And I was like, dude, I haven't lifted a weight for 10 years. I've been driving a truck. Like I'm not in good shape. He's like, just come down. You're always a good fighter. You could wrestle. And so I went down there, and the first night they put me against their best 155 pounder. And I just took him down at will, and he couldn't even come close. I threw up 3 times when I got done because I was so out of shape. But that's kind of when I really started embracing athletics and my abilities and stuff like that. And I felt really confident. That's probably the turning point for me, which is probably not the answer you were expecting.
No, that's a great answer. Actually, it's really good answer, to tell you the truth, because it doesn't
I mean,
happen for everybody different times. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it's what directed me to where I'm at now. So, I went to college. I worked in corporate world for a little while. Then I went back and worked for our family business and drove truck for 12 years. And I just got really unhealthy. We held livestock, and so I was going across country, no sleep, no eating, nothing for days at a time. And when I finally made the decision to get out of the truck, it was because my health was deteriorating, and so I had to do something to get that back. I needed to feel better about myself. And so I started working out, I started training and fighting. And that's when I started taking supplements. And back in Denison, we didn't have anywhere to get supplements or anybody to educate us on supplements. So we never dabbled with that stuff really. And so Carroll was the closest place I could go to GNC, and that's where I got my stuff. And then I started training, and we were sponsored by Max Muscle. And so my buddies told me, hey, you got to switch and start taking their supplements. And so I went from 155 pounds to 205 pounds in 8.5 months. And It was pretty much straight muscle. Yeah. And so I realized, holy crap, there's a huge difference in supplements. So I started getting interested in that and started researching it. And then we were actually out at a fight in Lincoln, Nebraska. And this guy comes walking in, and he was just a presence. He looked like Brock Lesnar. And I was like, who's that guy? And he's like, well, he owns the Max Muscle in Lincoln. And so I went and introduced myself, and I said, what would you think about me starting a store in Des Moines, Iowa? And he's like, I think you'd kill it. And never met this guy before, but he invited me out to visit him and to sit with him for a few days and see how he ran his store. And now fast forward 17 years later, me and him are partners together in a couple different businesses, and it's all worked out really well. So
that is amazing. Yeah. I used to drive over to Carroll too and grab some supplements, and probably the stuff we were getting, what was, like you said, you went from 155 with your switch, 155 to 205 in 8 months. That's an amazing weight, and it's all muscle. I mean, probably the stuff that you're getting at Walmart and, GNC is still a box store. I mean, whether we want to,
right.
It's still, they want to make money first. Everybody wants to make money, but there's different levels of that too.
Well, so, my theory with supplements has always been, if you're just honest with people and you get them the things they need and you start small, you're going to build that relationship and that trust with them. And that's really what you need when you're a nutritionist, is your clients to trust you and know that you're not just trying to, kill their checkbook every time they come in there. And a lot of, it's different for me too. I'm a store owner that has kids. And so I'm very protective of kids, whereas most of the nutrition stores down here are younger guys that don't have kids and want to make the big bucks, and they'll fill their bag up with 6 or 7 different items and hope they come back again. Whereas me, I will take 6 or 7 items out of your bag and leave you with one and say, let's start with this, see if it works, and then we can always add to it. And that's always been my motto and kind of the way that we operate our store. And I think it's paid off for us. So
I think you're probably right. You something you just said with trusting you and stuff. Have you noticed? And well, not even a question I normally would ask, but you work with both the men and the women's team at Grandview, and you're going to work with men and women's, and you work with a lot of female athletes too. Is there a difference in how you approach a male athlete as a female athlete? And I'm going to tell you why. When I coached boys, I wanted to make sure they knew I could beat them, so they respected me. Right. So I spent my first coach. I was a horrible coach. If I look back, I would say I was a horrible coach because a lot of times beat people up instead of helping them get better. I just wanted to make sure they knew they were learning from somebody better than them. Now, as a coach of female athletes, I am trying to make sure that they know they can trust me, that and once they know that I'm there for them, whether it's on the mat or off the mat, and I'm not going to steer them in a wrong direction. Those female athletes will do way more than any of those guy athletes ever did for me. Running through the brick wall, they will do anything in the world I ask, and I'm within reason, obviously, but once I've gained their trust, there's no telling how far they can go because they are willing
Yeah.
to believe what I say. They're willing to put the work in and all that. Whereas guys, if they didn't respect me, they weren't going to listen to me.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's definitely a different process. And I'll say it this way, not to put any of my guys down. The girls pay more attention. The girls for me are easier to coach. They're not as distracted as what my guy wrestlers are, my male athletes. The only issue I ever run into is, and this is why, so it's not just me. I have a team that works with me. So my son Dakota graduated from Iowa about 5 years ago. He's on staff with me, and he's probably doing a better job than I am right now with wrestling. He's really taken off, and so every year we're competing to see who gets more state champions, me or him. And
Nice.
he got me this year. I hate to say that, but he got me. And then I have Janae Halstead. So she's been working with me for about 15 years now, and she does a lot of my female wrestlers. They're more open to talk about more personal things, especially with weight loss and stuff like that with her sometimes. And if they're comfortable with me, that's great. But I've really turn the reins over to her with the female wrestlers right now. She builds a great rapport with them. I think you did a podcast with Gia not too long ago. And like Gia comes in and her and Janae do videos in the store, and they make different snack ideas and stuff like that and taste test them. And so she's built a really good foundation with the female wrestlers. The female wrestlers I work with are more of the older girls in college and stuff like that. And they want to be treated like the guys. They don't want to be treated any different. And like I said, I'm always anxious to work with the girls because I've had such good success with them, and I know they're going to pay attention and they're going to ask questions. A lot of my guys, we see our clients every 2 weeks during the wrestling season. I'm going to see them every week. And I don't know if you have this problem, but I have a hard time not becoming friends or building more of a personal relationship with them because I'm so in depth with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So we get sidetracked and talk about girlfriends and talk about other sports and some of that stuff, where it seems like with the girls, I stay more focused, and I have a daughter myself, so I'm a little bit more protective of the girls. I'm a little bit more patient with the girls, and that's on me. That's just how I am. I'm a little bit more protective. And even as a dad, I don't know how some of these guys can watch their daughters wrestle, because it would be hard for me to do. My daughter's a cheerleader. And so it's a completely different, she's a great athlete. She's great at soccer and some other sports, but she really loves the cheer thing. She's a girly girl. And so it's just different for me. I don't struggle with it, but I really embrace working with the females at this point.
Yeah. Well, here's a fun fact. There was a list a year or so ago of sports that had the most injuries, and cheerleading is above wrestling.
I know. Concussions. Yeah.
Yeah. And they get dropped on their head from spinning up about 20 feet in the air. And that's not a safe sport. I'd put them on the mat. Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. Since I started working with girls, and honestly, we talked earlier, when I was in high school, it wasn't so much about girls wrestling. It was not a thing. It was, we didn't really have much. There were some girls that came out one year that didn't stay out very long. The first girl that I started wrestling, as soon as she committed to it, I was like, this is completely different. And then that's when I started traveling around, and I absolutely love it. And I don't know if maybe it helps that I had daughters, and I'm a grandfather I have a granddaughter, that, I am protective of the girls. I think knowing that I'm grandpa, that I'm not a threat to them. They trust me and stuff. But yeah, I absolutely, I mean, we just took 65 girls down to Florida for a week to, wrestle for 3 days and be on the beach for 3 days, So I have a blast with these girls. We go out to eat, we do all kinds of stuff. And yeah, I can't imagine my life without without girls wrestling right now. I absolutely love it. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I had
I keep thinking, when do you stop? Because I'll be 55 this next year. I'm like, man, I don't know what's the date. When do people stop?
I, I don't think you stop till you lose the passion for it. I think if you're still committed and you wake up every morning looking forward to what you do, you go as long as you can. I don't think there needs to be a limit ever on you're too old to do this. If you're still making an impact on these girls and doing something you love to do, I mean, go as long as we can. That's what I think. And I think you had one of my girls down in Florida there in a rear.
Oh
She
yeah,
had
yeah,
yeah, she had a great tournament down there. I know she felt great. Her weight cut went great. And so it's so interesting to watch these girls, and I'm sure your experiences, 3 years ago when this all kind of started, 4 years ago when it was getting really big, girls didn't have to make so many weights because the competition really wasn't there. There wasn't a lot of girls doing it yet. And so they
yeah,
could kind of get by not having to cut weight or being at the right weight class and do okay. But now, I mean, it's the fastest growing sport in the world,
yeah.
and for good reason. But the competition keeps getting better and better and better. And so they got to start down their nutrition now, like the guys did. And so it's fun to watch it progress. But it's also scary just because I don't want the sport to just be about making weight. And I
Yep.
want it to be about the camaraderie, the learning life lessons. Out of all the athletes I work with, I work with every sport: football, basketball, everything, baseball. Um, but the quality of people that wrestle, not just the athletes, but their entire families and what they give back to the sport, what they give back to the community, just the type of people they are. They're hardworking and great people to become friends with. And so everybody asks me, why did you get so involved with wrestling? It's the hardest sport. It's the only sport where you have to make weight. Every other sport, I make these kids bigger, faster, stronger. There's no stress about making weight for a competition. But the reason why is because they're just such good people. I would choose wrestlers to work with any day of the week, just because their work ethic, they pay attention, they're respectful, just good people.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. You'd mentioned the growth. Well, we had almost 3,500 girls wrestling in the high school this year. The year I started, there was 20. The first year I coached a girl in high school, there was 22 girls in the high school. Most of them were taking forfeits at whatever the low weight class was,
Right.
and that's you know well, Felicity, Rachel Waters were some of those bigger names at the time. They were really the only ones doing big. Elena Vederick in Norwalk. I don't know if you know Elena or
Yep.
not. Those
Yep.
those were some of the bigger names at that time. But we'd go to tournaments, all girls tournaments, and the weight class would be 120 to 145.
Right.
Because that's how it was. And now, oh my God, that's one part I don't. At one time, and I'll talk to the girls, the older ones, and it's like, well, we used to know everybody, and it was a big family, and I don't want it
Yep.
to lose that, and I don't think it has, because I think anybody that's getting involved in the girls' side of the sport is really kind of pushing that whole camaraderie thing. And then
Yeah.
you talked about Gia and some of those other girls in that Des Moines area. A lot of them are, some are going to big games, some are going to Siebold, some are, with Perselli's and Grandview's,
Yep.
stuff. Wow, to watch those young ladies wrestle is amazing. I watched Twin River Duels is one of our big AAU tournaments, and I watched a match, probably second or third, maybe fourth graders, maybe fifth. I don't know. So it's hard to tell in girls because they were so small. But I was like, I don't know. I never wrestled a match that looked that good. I mean, it
And
was
they're
like
brutal.
yes, yes, but their technique was spot on, and they were scrambling through situations like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's going to be scary to coach against these kids later on in life, man. I hopefully
Our
that's
first,
when I retire is when those girls hit high
right.
school. And
Our first female that we worked with was Katie Biscagula, and
uh,
and so watching her, man, she caught my attention right away, and I was hooked after watching her. I was like, wow, this girl is gifted. And so, and we have so many. I mean, we could drop names all day long, but I just love watching the growth and so like Eliza Mitchell, Gable's daughter. That girl, she plays every sport. Uh, but if she would just focus on wrestling, she'd be so good at that. But she's great at swimming. She's good at every I mean, she obviously has great genetics as well, but I think if she focused on wrestling, she'd be a huge up and comer. Molly Carlson, I love working with her. She plays a lot of sports too, and so it's such an interesting. What are your thoughts, I guess, on the girls that participate in all these? Do you think you have to focus a lot on one sport right now in this day and age, or do you think you can still, play multiple sports and accomplish some big goals by doing that?
So one of my best athletes that I've ever had in was Tatum Shepard. She three-time placer, always ranked higher than she finished. She wasn't very good on the backside. Um, Mentally was always tough for her, but she played. I mean, she was 3 to 4 sport athlete in choir, valedictorian, head of everything, did everything, pitched, pitcher. She's actually playing softball for Simpson, made the choice.
Okay.
But yeah, and so I'm always going to be I'm a small school guy. And
Yeah.
so in small schools, you don't always have a choice. I mean, you do have a
Right.
choice to go out, but if you don't go out, we might not have a softball team this year. If you
Right.
don't go,
Right.
so there's that pressure too. And I hope, I know it goes more towards that, especially if you're going to, once we get more into the D1, once girls wrestling has more D1, and we're really looking at that, yeah, they're probably going to have to specialize. It almost
Right.
hurts. It almost hurts. And I won't say any names or anything. And she's not from Iowa. I've known the family not real well, but I know them. She's elected to homeschool, work on Olympic style wrestling only as a freshman. And
Really.
yeah, yeah, and she's very good. I mean, well, as an incoming freshman, she placed at Fargo this year, in the 16U. I don't think she wrestled juniors, but to me, giving up I don't understand. And then I know there's other reasons to homeschool, so I don't want to put anybody down that does, because I don't know your situation.
Right. Right.
But man, I loved school. I mean, not school. I didn't like school. I loved my friends that I got to meet. And it's crazy. A lot of people say their college friends are their friends for life. I still talk to the guys that I wrestled with in high school. There's a
Yep.
group of about 5 or 6 of us. We don't get together as often, but we've flown to hang out, and that's with my high school friends. So to take that
Right.
away, like man, I hate seeing that. And then not to be, I wasn't a great athlete. I played football until Coach Hagan talked me into running cross country. Then I ran cross country. Because I was 125 pounder as a senior. He's like, "You're not going to college for football." You're right. And then I played baseball. I was really good at that game where you could spit the sunflower seeds through the fence and not hit the fence. Because that's how much I sat the bench in baseball. So it wasn't like I was a good athlete at those other sports, but I still loved being on those sports. And I hate to see kids not have that opportunity to play more sports. I know it's different. Like one of my best friends right now is coach at Cedar Falls, Ali Jabrock. And I know Cedar Falls is a big school. So man, you almost have to concentrate on one or two things or you're not making the varsity team.
Yeah, and that's the only sad part, that it's been that transition coming down here to Des Moines. Like Denison, you could play every sport that came along, and down here you're seeing it get more and more just one sport athletes, just because if they really want to go to the next level, they have to. It's year
Yeah.
round at this point. And so I do hate to see that, but then there's also the people who are like, man, I wish I could get them on the mat just a few more times, because
Yep.
there's a lot of potential there. So I'm always torn between what I want to recommend to the kids, but as long as they're happy and they're learning and they're learning the value of teamwork and being part of a team, I think they're going to be headed the right direction. So
Yeah. I do AAU stuff in the off season, and I do go down to USA State. I hold both cards. I just coach on the AAU side and more in the organization. I try to get my kids to do 1 to 2 of there's the AAU State huge tournament, 1,600 girls this year, and then Twin River Duels had 100 dual teams, there.
wow.
So and I don't necessarily, the dual meet is more important to me because I like them to be coached by somebody else. I like them to be on a team with people that they don't know. So they don't rely on, first of all, so they don't rely on me as their coach and only person that they can take instruction from. But then I want them to meet other people and have just a good time in the sport. So I don't
Yeah.
push much after that. I did have one girl that was at Fargo this year, and I think she went 2-2. Had it, for first year of ever doing freestyle. I think she did very well.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have good athletes. I think if we did wrestle year round, we'd probably be better. But we've always been top 15, 16 in the state. I've
Yeah.
had
I've been
minimum of
following.
yeah, minimum of 2 state place winners every year since we've, that prior to IWCOA. I even coached a girl when I was at South Central Calhoun for Ridgeview, because we did that back in the old days. When I told Erin, a girl like that, she's like, "You can't do that." I said, "Well, we did." So, but so a place winner the year before I came, I even coached a place winner at Ridgeview. So
Well,
um,
you've done great. I've been watching what you've been doing with these girls, and then even at Girls State this year, I know you were. I can't remember what award you were recognized for, but we were there with a group of people, and I was like, he taught me in Mat Club. so,
yeah,
so
that was pretty cool to be able to, my brother was a big influence on me. If there's a black sheep in every family, that is me. He was the salutatorian, captain of the football team, class president. I was not. I'll just put it that way. And
right.
so and my parents both had their own businesses. So my brother's the one that took me to wrestling meets and all that. So getting that award, getting the president's award is what I got. But to have my brother be able to walk out there with me that was a really
Yeah,
cool thing, and
yeah, that was a neat moment.
he's super super supportive of me. I haven't always been the greatest little brother in the world, I'm sure, but he's always been a pretty good big brother. So um,
Oh,
I'm going to give you one last question, and
okay,
actually one last question, and then a final thoughts. Um, and I gotta narrow it down between a couple different two last questions. If you could make
okay.
one rule change in wrestling, what would that rule change be?
Uh, Something's got to be done about the stalling. I would
There you
say.
go.
Uh, Uh, I I don't know which way to go on that, but there's got to be something different. I watch these matches, where you have an obvious aggressor, and then all of a sudden they let up for a second and they're getting a stall call where the other guy didn't wrestle for 2 periods and there was no warning or nothing. And so there's got to be more consistency with the stalling calls.
Yep. And this may not be a wrestler with you, but or maybe it is somebody in the wrestling community. Um, who is someone like? It's a little different question for you than it is for a high school athlete or a college athlete. But who do you look up and aspire to be like?
Oh man.
Or
Um,
maybe who inspired you in your job presently, or in athletics? I don't know exactly how to ask because it's a different. If it's definitely a different question.
Honestly, I mean, if we're going from a personal perspective, the answer for me is going to be my grandpa or my dad. Great men, hard workers, work ethic. It was crazy. That's where I learned my work ethic from, and so I watched how they grew and changed and over the years and became better men. And I hope that I can do that. Just be a better person as I age. I'd say that would be one. And then one other, from like a business perspective and aspect, probably probably Chad Case. So he's the guy I was talking about out in Lincoln that really pushed me to open a nutrition store and get involved in the business. And I've watched all the success he's had, and I've tried to take as many pointers from him as I can. And like I said, now we've become partners in a couple other ventures. And he's just a good all around guy. He's a coach. He coaches football. He's not in the wrestling world, but I'm trying to drag him into that, kicking and screaming.
Uh-huh.
And so I would say Chad Case is the guy I look up to as far as like from a business perspective.
Very nice. Good answers. And then the last thing I always do on every podcast is I always give people an opportunity to have some final thoughts, um, of course, it has to be a profound statement. Actually, it doesn't. Just anything that you could think of that kind of puts a bow on the whole thing.
Since we were talking about Nick Mitchell, and that'd be another one that I would throw out there. I'm older than him, and so I don't know how I aspire to be to be
I
that.
understand what you're
But
saying.
yeah, thank you. That was not very easy to explain, but words of wisdom. He always has something that he says at the end of every practice, or even Coach Schwab has some kind of little tidbit that he gives that you leave thinking about. And Mitchell always talks about doing the things you don't want to do, or don't wait to do things until you feel like doing them, because you'll never do them. He's like, if you wait to lift when you feel like it, you're never going to lift that day. If you wait to go run when you feel like it, you're never going to do it. And he says, no one cares about how you feel. No one cares about your feelings when you're trying to become the greatest that you can be at whatever sport or profession or whatever you're trying to accomplish. Is no one really cares about your feelings. You just got to get up and do it anyway. And so there's little tidbits that I take away from every time I get a chance to sit in a wrestling room with Coach Mitchell or Coach Schwab, Coach Volmecki at Northwest. I always learn something from those guys, and it's just a little takeaway, and there's always a little bit of ounce of education or something that inspires you. And so I just really encourage the kids, when the coaches are talking and it's not about wrestling, it's still about something important in life. And if you can take something away that's not related to the sport, that is just going to make you a better person in general, I think that's key. And so listen to the coaches, listen to what they're saying outside of the sport talk and everything else, because these guys it's been passed down from generation. I mean, Coach Mitchell learned a lot from Jim Miller. You read Jim Miller's books or whatever, and you hear a lot of things that Coach Mitchell says, but they're all really important. Even Coach Gable, you listen to Coach Gable talk, and those guys, they didn't care a lot about feelings, about how you felt. They tried to make you a better person. It might seem harsh, it might seem crass at the time when it's happening, but 10 years later, when you look back at those moments, they're going to mean something to you. And so I always say, pay attention to the stuff that you might not think matters right now.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah,
Since you brought up Jim Miller, this is my best Jim Miller story. It was after the World Cup in Coralville, and I went over to across the street, 30 Hop. I'm sure you've maybe gone and ate at 30 Hop if you've been to Coralville. And it was a little later, and I was having a few beverages. Was not hydrating that time, and so Coach Miller was up at the bar, and I've talked to him before. He knows Hagen very well, and they were telling stories about when Gable was preparing for the Olympics. How it was in Waterloo. It wasn't like the Olympic Training Center then. It was in Waterloo, and they had like 12 people lined up, and Gable stayed in. One person went in after another. After he never went out, and they rotated in on Gable, and I thought that was just some of the stories he has and things that he's been around. And then I look over, and Randy Lewis, Olympic champion, was sitting at a table. And Randy Lewis he likes to go out with Royce Alger. So if you know anybody about Royce Alger and Randy Lewis, they've probably had a few beverages themselves. And I went to Randy Lewis wrestling camp it was in Vermillion one year. It was with Chad Johnson, his brothers, and Brian Reeve and Craig Drivelbus, and those names probably ring a bell.
Yep.
Anyways, great camp. I don't think I saw Randy Lewis once. I don't think he was there. I think it was just the Iowa guys came and ran the camp. But I told him, I said, yeah, Mr. Lewis, I went to your wrestling camp in 1988, I believe it was, either 87 or 88. And he's like, why'd you go there? I said, because you're an Olympic champion. He goes, damn right I am. That's all I said. So, just
I've been really lucky. Over the last few years, I became friends with Joe Gibbons, and so I've met all these guys. Royce, Joe just had a barn dance. He has one every year at his place up here in Grimes, and Royce was out there, and he was hurting a little bit because he had played golf. He got inducted to the Hall of Fame that day, and they were on the golf course, and it was so hot. And so he's always a character. If you get a chance to sit beside him at a barn dance at Joe Gibbons Ranch, plant yourself there, because he's good. Yeah, he's got some good stories. So that might be another answer to give you as far as like who I look up to or who inspires me is Joe Gibbons. That guy, he's got a wealth of knowledge and information. And when they came out with that movie, The Duel,
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to meet all those guys. And so Gable was at Joe's doing the interview, and I went and talked to Joe the next day. And that guy is just always so positive. And you look at his career, what he did in wrestling, and now what he's done in his professional life. And he's always a positive individual to be around. And I'd say my life really changed a lot once I met, the Helgesons and Joe Gibbons and some of these guys that I hang out with now down here. It's just a different kind of mentality that these guys have, not just with work, but with sports and everything else, but it translates to your everyday life. And I feel like those guys are really inspirational to be around as well, whether it's athletics or business or whatever you're trying to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think we could probably talk another hour if we really wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the stop button.
Okay.
Definitely, we're gonna do some more stuff with this because you've really piqued my interest more than it's been in a long time on
Great.
something that can help my team get better and help kids around me get better. So I'm gonna hit stop and just stay on for a minute or two more.